Welcome to Beyond the Protocol. I'm so excited to have you here, but even more excited today to have my guest, Celeste Brantolino, on with us, who I've had the pleasure of meeting again through LinkedIn. And I must admit, I think I was a little starstruck after our first meeting because training is one of my pain points, topics, things that I really, really, really am passionate about. And so to find someone who's made a career out of learning and development in the corporate environment and has just done some incredible things at organizations. Yeah, I'm all for this. So, welcome, Celeste. I'm so glad to have you here.
Well, thank you, and I'm thrilled to be here, and like you, I felt like we were kindred spirits. It's refreshing to find someone who works in clinical ops who truly understands the value of a foundational L&D program and how it can be used as a leverage to bring your clinical ops program, not just to a level of compliance, but to a really high performing level that rewards people, you know. Um, I think
So,
what clinical ops does is so important and it sometimes I don't think we always nurture our own development as much as we should.
agree, agree. And I love the idea or the concept that it's not just checking a box, right? We're not just reviewing SOPs to say we did it or to kind of have some reference point of how we should work in a standardized way, but it's a way to truly help you develop and grow and move into different roles and even into leadership eventually. So this isn't just developing talent right now. We're developing future leaders who know how to operationalize and work in a high quality way.
Absolutely. A- and lead others to do that out. You want to have that multiplier effect when you start to invest in people, that they start to invest in other people and those people invest.
Yeah, and then it just starts to touch every facet of your organization. Yeah, in a very good way.
Right.
Yeah, so that's what we're here today to talk about. And I would love for you to share with us your journey and how you got into L&D and where you are today.
Well, sure. So I've worked in learning and development for a little over 20, almost 25 years. I started out as an instructional designer for American Power Conversion, and we were on the launch team for Data Center University. That was really back in kind of the early days of e-learning. So that's where I learned my craft. My bachelor's degree was in education. I had taught at a university. I always loved learning. I worked on a lot of projects for um, the orientation leaders, and I was always brought in for presentations on how to develop emerging leaders. So I think that's kind of where my journey started. And then I strategically tried to round out things to move into corporate learning. So then I started as an instructional designer at American Power Conversion, um, and became a senior instructional designer with Schneider Electric when they acquired APC. Then I moved on to be a training manager in for Tyson, which is the first letter of the FDA, right? So it's the Food and Drug Administration. So that began my journey down regulatory compliance. Um, and I worked for Del Monte. I've worked for Compact Tomra. I've owned my own consulting firm and went and helped turn around troubled training programs. And then most recently, I'm with Exela Pharma Sciences as the Senior Director of Learning and Development and really help them build a foundational learning and development program, training program that that drove excellence in their operations, but I also launched a 3-tiered leadership development program. I'm really fortunate that the executive team at Exela understands that it's it's important to have that technical expertise,
Mhm.
but you have to have those soft skills. And that's what makes a well-rounded, high-performing individual. And, in the clinical area, in pharma manufacturing, you know, the technical can't be overstated. We need people who can execute flawlessly because the stakes are very high, and it's costly to make mistakes. We need to do things right the first time, um, but we we have a mission to make safe, pure, and effective medicine, um, and we also need to be able to lead people effectively. Um, what we do can be stressful. So,
Yes.
we need people who have high IQs as well as people who have high EQs, right?
Yes. So I want to just immediately the light bulb went off when you were sharing that, and I thought your current company is in GMP, you're manufacturing, right? And so I can so envision many of my colleagues on my side of things in the clinical space operations saying, well, that's a very different environment. So their training would be the requirement and what's needed would look different than what we require on the GCT side of things. And I would dispute that. I don't agree with that. I think the same level of intentionality and planning and strategy for learning and development and making sure the teams on the GMP side, the humans that you work with to make sure they work in a very standardized and high quality way, that 100% translates over to our clinical operations teams.
Yeah, I think I agree with you because for manufacturing to be successful, we need consistency, repeatability, and quality. And to me, those things also translate into a lab environment, into a clinical environment. Um, you know, Running an HPLC, you have to have the technical knowledge. You have to have a standard protocol, right? That you have to execute the same way each time. You're not freestyling it. You're not saying, well, I know it says we should do this, but I really feel like we should do this. That doesn't happen in pharma. It's a recipe. It is a protocol. We follow that.
Agree. Agree. And I think that's a great lead in to kind of talking about why some training programs, if they even exist, because I've been in organizations where there is no training program, there is no development. When someone starts at a company, onboarding is just sign these papers, meet some people, here's our SOPs, and then we're throwing you in the deep end with the team and figure it out. And that's not a training program. So I would love to have your perspective. What makes a training program successful? Whether you have one and you need to revamp it, or you have nothing and you need to get one in place. What are kind of the top recipe items that would make a training program successful?
I think the first thing that I do when I go in to any organization is I conduct a pretty thorough needs assessment, trying to get a baseline of what are they doing? What are they doing well? And what needs to be improved? And where are the gaps? What are they not doing? So a lot of companies, especially if they're small companies that are, you know, less than 500 employees, less than 100 employees, they don't have a formal training program. They do what I would probably best describe as an apprenticeship. They'll have an SOP, you'll sign for the SOP that you've read it, and then they'll pair you with someone who will kind of guide from the side. And that works if you are really small and your growth is slow and strategic. It
Mhm.
it doesn't work very well when you land a big contract or you land a big piece of business and now you have to scale up. Um, and you went from hiring one person, every 6 months to every year to, hey, we've got to figure out how to onboard 20 people. Um, the one-to-one, I'm gonna walk you through everything and bring you along very slowly does not work that way. So then you're going to have a more structured training program. Um, Virtually, that begins with making sure that in addition to your master training plan and you've identified what your standard operating procedures are, but you may need to have standardized work instructions. Um, you will also have to have trainers that are very good at knowledge transfer. Not every what I would call expert worker or strong technical person can train. That is a whole other skill set. Sometimes the best operator is the absolute worst trainer
Trainer. Yes.
because they they cannot break it down for that new person. Um, I will see some of those great operators just look at the news person and be like, "Just do it." And I'm like, "That that is not helpful instruction." You know? Um, the other kind of challenge that I see with companies that don't embrace a foundational L&D or training program is they think telling is training, that they'll herd everyone into a conference room or they'll do a stand-up meeting and they'll quickly run through what the process is and they'll say, "Okay, everybody understand? Okay, good. All right, let's go. Go team." And and then they're bewildered as to why they've got deviations or they've got people who are struggling or people who just leave.
Yes.
Turnover is a huge expense in any company. Done all that work to find that best fit employee that we're giving them the training to be successful and we are developing them.
Yes. Yes. And the recipe that you just gave, I was thinking and applying it to operations and clinical trials and, bringing everyone into a room and saying, this is how you do it. Now go do it is exactly what we do. Internally with our study teams, we give a protocol, we'll have a training. The medical team will tell us what to do on the protocol. We document that as training, and then we have to go. And then we go out to the sites and we do initiation visits where basically they're stuck in a room for 8 hours with us, right? And we just go over everything with a slide set and say, okay, now you go. And it's just repeated in one way after another and then we wonder why we have deviations, study drug that's not monitored properly or managed properly, or patients that don't know how to follow the assessments and what we need them to do when they leave the clinic. So I think I just realized that L&D is not just within our organization, right? It goes out to our vendors and our sites and our patients. And so, what is our formal standardized training that we deploy, not just internally, but externally too?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I like to apply the uh, see one, do one, teach one model of training, where they're going to watch someone execute a task, then they're going to practice executing that task until they derive some level of proficiency and they state that they are comfortable.
Yeah.
And then to make sure that they truly understand it, then they teach back to their trainer. Because if you can teach something, you understand it.
Right. You've mastered it.
Mhm.
Yeah. I agree. And I think that requires a complete mix up mashup of the way we consider trading, because that also is going to require a change in how we invest. Because oftentimes there's no budget really except for an investigator meeting or the SIV visits. That's the only budget we really have in terms of training. And then I never see like a budget, a line item for a study level for when new team members come in or there's turnover. How do we manage that at our vendors and our CRO partners? There's not really a stated investment for this, right? So then we're just kind of, it's just an afterthought. When no money goes to it, no investment comes to it, it's just an afterthought.
Right. Right. So it's really important to plan to be successful. And it's really important to meet with those key stakeholders, people from the finance area when you're building your budget and make the strong case and make that case in a way where you're explaining the cost of not doing it right. Here's the cost of doing it correctly. Here is the cost of failing to do it correctly.
Yes.
So I had an old boss that once said, "Spend it now or spend it later. We can spend it smartly or we can spend it very unwisely. Which path
Yeah.
do we want to take?"
And the unwise path is always greater than the strategic upfront path. Yeah, you spend so much more fixing what was wrong when you could have just started out the right way.
Right.
So I love the idea or the concept that training can be used as a leverage, right? To develop leaders and for people to understand that if I learn this in a very strategic, documented way that shows I understand and I'm becoming efficient and an expert at this, that I can be promoted, I can be developed and rewarded for my knowledge, and the time and energy I invest as an employee or a consultant or a vendor or a site. I'm applying this in my world as we go along. I can be rewarded for that. I would love to hear about the program that you created and rolled out in your organization that leverage training in this way.
So are you talking about my 3-tiered leadership program?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I just want to make sure. Yeah. So um, about 3 years ago, I started the leadership series. And at the very base level, it's the LEAP program, and that's the Leadership Excellence Acceleration Program. It's a year-long program. They meet once a quarter. It's a hybrid approach, so they receive some online learning modules that are designed to give them a foundation in leadership principles, understanding what good leadership looks like. Um, there are books that they are going to read, and then we meet for a couple of hours once a quarter and we do exercises as a group that are designed to kind of tie together all of the assignments that they've done through the LMS, the reading that they've done, and the courses that they've taken. And what I have found is there's a lot of aha moments. What they thought leadership was and what leadership actually is a bit of a shift for them. And, lots of people think leadership's about titles and leadership's about getting to call the shots and having a lot of power. Um, but we really break down that leadership amounts to a lot of responsibility, and and good leadership is the ability to positively influence others. And, it's not something for the lighthearted. It's something to be taken very seriously. So that foundational program is for when you want to go from being an individual contributor to being a lead. And a lead doesn't have official direct reports, but they have to be in a position where they're influencing the activities on the floor. They are really the right hand of that supervisor that's on the floor or in the lab, and they are making sure that their their team is successful. And I think the hardest thing to do is to go from a peer to being someone who's got a little bit of what I would call unofficial authority, because you're in this kind of no man's land. You're in this gray area. Um, and it's it's easy to get lost. So we walk them through different scenarios. We walk them through different activities to get them to feel comfortable in a safe space about moving from that peer role to being in that kind of quasi leadership role. So the next tier of it is the Emerging Leader Series, and that's when you're ready to be a supervisor or manager. And it is also a year-long program, but we meet once a month. It is also a hybrid program. It has books, it has online learning, it has assignments. And then we meet once a month. We do exercises that are designed to kind of bring to light and tie together everything that we've been learning about. There's also a lunch and learn with our executive team where they get to ask questions of the executive team and really understand what the needs of the business are and how they can support the needs of the business to drive success. Our third tier is the Senior Management Academy when you're ready to move to a director or VP level. Um, that is a 4-month program. It's pretty intense. We meet every 2 weeks. Um, and it is hybrid. There's an online component, there is an in class component, and there's meeting with the senior executive team. With all 3 levels, there's also a mentorship component. So they have a mentor that they can go to and they can ask questions, and they have assignments where they specifically have to bring assignments to their mentor and get feedback. And that helps them grow their network. It helps them understand the importance of getting feedback, mentoring, and good coaching. So yeah, it's when I go into organizations and launch a leadership program, it's generally because they have had a track record of putting really strong, technically competent people into leadership roles, but they don't know how to lead. They know how to execute the task. But when you are a manager or a supervisor or a director or a vice president, your job is to inspire others to excellence. Your job shifts from being the doer to being
Yes.
the coach. And if you're proficient at inspiring and leading and coaching, it looks easy. I kind of liken it to my thoughts about parenthood before I became a parent. I had a lot of ideas about how I was going to do that, and right up until the point where they handed me this infant, and I thought, and you're like, what do I do with the person? Oh, and I think that's a lot of, like, management, right? We've we typically have all had managers before we become a manager, right? So we all have very strong opinions about what we would do if we became a manager, but the tables turn once you become that supervising work and, you know, you you are faced with conflict. You are faced with a team that isn't working cohesively. And you're just I've seen some of my participants come back in and they're like, I need help.
And I think for me, having been on both sides of the line, right, and experiencing that, what do I do now? Because I'm really good at running studies. And so now I've gotten the opportunity to manage a team and help them and mentor them. And I find myself in this director level role. And you find out very quickly that leadership is service. And it's really helping your team and the people that you are responsible now for their output. It's not what I do personally. I'm responsible for someone else's work. And so how do you motivate them, encourage them, teach them to do the work at the level they need to, and that they want to work for you? Because if your team doesn't feel like you have them as the priority and that you're in it for them, they will not work for you. And so there's so many lessons to be learned when you're becoming a leader and a manager and in that position.
Yeah. And, there's so much truth to the adage people don't leave companies, they leave managers, right? So if you're not investing in a management development program, a leadership development program, you're going to see turnover, especially if you've got a lot of new managers. If you're not supporting them, th- they're gonna make mistakes. We all make mistakes as new managers, but we'll make less mistakes and we'll recover more quickly if we support them with some leadership development.
Absolutely. And what I'm seeing right now, because I think the market that we're in, you can't just leave your organization and easily get another position right now. So we have folks that are staying in the role. They're not leaving. There isn't turnover, but they're not doing the work. They're quiet quitting. They're passively aggressive with management that doesn't know how to manage them and is making their lives difficult. And I'm just seeing this vicious hamster wheel of poor leadership at every level, on the site side, on the pharma side, at the vendor level. And it's just maddening to me because it can be as simple as just showing people how to lead.
Right. And people people won't follow you until they know you care about them. Um and
And that you're knowledgeable, that you know how to do the work that you're asking them to do. And if you don't, you are in the red before you even get started.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So I would, we kind of identify, well, first of all, I just want to say, I think your LEAP program is I love it, and I love that it builds, and so there's a layer here, there's a layer here, and there's a layer here, and at each level, it's more intense, you get more time, you have to commit more, do more, um, and show yourself approved, and I think sometimes that's the piece that no, I think a lot of times that's the piece that's missing. We've mastered how to run a trial, we've mastered these very important pieces that make a trial successful, but we don't have the soft skills or the management skills. And a lot of times, the folks in the chairs that are the study team, they don't come from MBA programs. They're not business administration majors. And so we're learning on the fly how to be project managers and implement business principles and management and leadership. And so I think it's so key that organizations get a clue and implement and create programs like your LEAP program.
Yeah. Yeah. I think once you get executive level buy-in for it, it's easy. I think a lot of organizations um don't always understand if you make the investment, you'll get the return on that investment. What's that old science saying? Wise men plant trees knowing they may never sit in the shade. You know, it and the other saying, "Oh, well, if we train them or if we give them this and they leave, we've lost that investment." And L&D people always respond with, "If you don't and they stay, what are the consequences?" Right?
Absolutely. Right.
And it's it it is really important because um I have seen high performing teams evaporate when a really ill-equipped person gets put in charge of them. They do the things that you talk about, the quiet quitting, the passive aggressive, the you know, the sabotage, but they're smart about it, right?
Mhm.
Like they will I have seen teams take down a manager because that manager just was so ill-equipped to lead that team. And they were like, not happening."
Not here, yeah. And it's sad to see, to watch that because that manager, was most likely a peer of that team. And so to see that kind of self-implosion happen, and then from a human perspective, it's another human that's being mistreated, that's on the other side of that, that has to go home and still be a family member or a friend or in the community. And so that's just lends itself to the toxicity that I see, that we all feel and see. And there's a way to alleviate that. And it's simple as L&D. It lends itself to the culture, and I know I'm all about people, process, culture. That's what I live and breathe, from my perspective in clinical operations, and training really does impact culture directly.
Yeah, 100%. When
Yeah.
when you have a culture of learning, people go out of their way to make sure that their teammates are successful.
Mhm.
They will go out of their way to make sure that the business is successful. When absent a culture of learning, you have a lot of individuals that are advocating for their own kind of self-interest
Yes.
versus the interest of the team, the interest of the organization at large.
Mhm. Agree.
And who suffers? The patient, right? Who ultimately bears the brunt of the lack of leadership and organization and foundational culture setting? The patient. They either don't get the medicine or the medicine isn't safe, pure, and effective.
I agree. I totally agree, and um I think it's just an unfortunate mishap that somehow we just have decided that this is like a lower item on the totem pole, when really it has such deep reverberating implications when you don't intentionalize learning and training and development in your organization.
Right.
Yeah.
But even if you get that support, you have to make sure that a big mistake that I've seen with some L&D departments and some training departments is they get that initial support and they go off in a direction that makes them feel good. They make these pretty courses, they make these dynamic, engaging things, but they aren't making sure that they're driving the needs of the business forward. They aren't meeting with the expert worker. They aren't going into the operation or the lab and they aren't sitting down with them and figuring out what do you need to be successful.
Right.
They are you know, I cringe when I do a needs assessment and I see someone who's a trainer and I say, "Hey, what are you working on?" They're like, "Oh, I'm working on a training program." I'm like, "Oh, okay. So walk me through how you're putting this together." And they're like, "Yeah, so basically I'm taking what's in the SOP and I'm making a PowerPoint." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. Uh, how much time have you spent with the people that are executing this procedure." And they're blank staring back at me, and I'm like, "We we don't we don't create curriculum in a vacuum. We don't create master training plans on an island. You know, we need to make sure that every training outcome is aligned to driving the success of the operation of the labs forward. Otherwise, it's it's wasting people's time, it's wasting resources, and companies that's why companies don't really want to invest sometimes in L&D or in training because there's some bad players that just they want to make pretty PowerPoints.
Yeah.
And there's no alignment to the overall needs of the organization.
They don't know, like, you don't go see a florist when you need surgery. And so you can't bring in a L&D group or department and then not bring in the experts who really know how to build that and implement it.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Or the other kind of big mistake that I see is they will take that best operator or that best lab person and they'll be like, "Okay, you're going to train." And they flounder because
It doesn't qualify them. That doesn't qualify them to be a trainer. It qualifies them to be an expert that is sought out when the training is developed so that we understand how to do this properly and what is your workflow and how are you successful in this role. But it doesn't qualify them to teach others.
right,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. And it makes me think about some years ago, a lot of the CROs, the bigger ones, would have these CRA training programs. And you were known like individuals sought those companies out because they knew they could get trained. They would be understand how to do their role and be successful as CRAs. And I remember being a beneficiary of CRAs that went through those programs were assigned to my studies as a sponsor. And it was just a marked difference in the way the monitoring was executed from those CRAs that had gone through that program. And it was like a LEAP program almost, where it was very structured and you had levels you had to accomplish before you could be assigned to certain studies and teams. And it worked. And then it just went away. And now you have CRAs and they're good people, they're good humans, they just don't know how to execute the role properly. And that impacts our trials, right? The data is what we need, but the data is poor quality because this very critical role no longer has the training, support, and development that's needed.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. I can't solve the world's problems one live show, but I hope that the folks that take the time to listen to today really understand the importance and the criticality of formal training and development programs within their organizations. And if you don't know how to do that and you don't have the expertise internally, go get it and bring it in so that your folks are supported and developed and feel like you feel they're worth the investment because the work output is so much greater when that's in place.
Yes, absolutely.
So I'd love to have I think the best way to end is for you to share, give us a gold nugget, some wisdom, for those of us that are in leadership and have the ability to make the decision to bring in a formal L&D program or shore up the one we have and make the investment. What would be some wisdom or guidance you would give to that leader that was listening today?
Have a clear vision of what you want to accomplish, the benefits that it will bring to the organization, and identify some key milestones to demonstrate that you are on track with your vision and your objectives, and make sure that it all ties in to the success of the organization. So it's aligned to the needs of the business.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Thank you, Celeste. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to joining us today.
Thank you, Melody. This has been so much fun.